Han Mingi sat in her usual spot in the back corner of the combat theory classroom. She was small, even for a human, with short black hair and quiet eyes that watched everything. Around her, alien students filled the large room with their noise. In movement, the biggest and loudest were the Dakaran. These reptile-like warriors stood 8 feet tall with thick green scales and sharp claws. They took up the front rows, their deep voices rumbling as they talked about their latest victories in the training arena. Their yellow eyes looked down on everyone else, especially the humans. "Today we study the Battle of Vex Prime," announced Commander Veltar, a massive Vekaran with scars across his face. "This battle shows why the Vekaran Empire leads the galaxy in warfare." Minji opened her notebook and began writing. She always took notes, even when the lessons were clearly meant to praise the Vekaran and make other species feel small. Commander's voice boomed through the room as he described how Vekaran warriors crushed their enemies with pure strength and savage fighting skills. "Physical power decides everything in combat," Veltar said, his claws clicking on the display screen. "The weak fall. The strong survive. This is the way of the universe." Behind Minji, she heard quiet whispers from other human students. There were only 12 humans at the Galactic Combat Academy, and they all felt the weight of being different. While other species had natural weapons like claws, thick skin, or poison, humans seemed to have nothing special at all. "Humans are so weak," laughed a Dekaran, student named Kolvash. He was the Academy's top fighter, young but already feared by students from every species. "I heard they need tools just to cut their food." Other Vekaran students joined his laughter. Even some aliens from other species smiled. It was easier to laugh with the Dekaran than become their targets. Minji kept writing. She had heard these jokes many times before. Humans were new to the Galactic Federation, accepted only 3 years ago. Most aliens still saw them as a weak species that got lucky with technology. They thought humans belonged in research labs, not combat academies. When class ended, Mingi packed her things slowly. She watched as Kolvash pushed past a group of Valkyrie students. The Valkyrie looked like living crystals, beautiful but fragile. They moved aside quickly, their crystal bodies making soft musical sounds as they trembled. Class breakers, Kolvash growled. "Real warriors have places to be." The Valkyrie said nothing. It learned, like everyone else, that arguing with Dekaran only brought pain. Minji walked toward the door, but stopped when she heard her name. "Hey, Minji," called Park Jinuk, another human student. He was taller than her, with a friendly face and kind eyes. "Want to eat lunch together?" She nodded. Jinuk was her only real friend at the academy. He studied engineering while she focused on combat theory, but they both understood what it meant to be human in a place that valued only strength. They walked through the station's main corridor. Nexus Prime was huge, with levels stretching up and down as far as the eye could see. Students from dozens of species moved through the halls, but there was always a clear pattern. The Karan walked wherever they wanted. Everyone else moved out of their way. "Did you hear about the sparring match today?" Ginyok asked as they found an empty table in the food court. "What happened?" Minji asked, though she could guess. "Kolvash fought 3 modern students at once. Went to beat them all in less than 2 minutes. Jinuk shook his head. "The instructors acted like it was amazing, but those modern kids are built for water combat, not land fighting. It wasn't fair." Minji ate her food slowly, thinking. The modern were fish-like aliens with blue skin and gills. On their water worlds, they were probably incredible fighters. But here, breathing air and fighting on solid ground, they were at a huge disadvantage. That was the problem with the academy. It was built by Vekaran, following Vekaran rules, designed for Vekaran. Success. Other species had to adapt or fail. "Sometimes I wonder why we're here," Jinuk said quietly. "Earth Command sent us to learn, but what are we really learning? That we're weak? That we don't belong?" Minji looked around the food court. At one table, the Karan students arm wrestled, while others cheered. At another, Tikfel students, insect-like beings with multiple arms, sat silently, their compound eyes watching the Vekaran nervously. In the corner, a few human students ate together, talking in low voices. "We're learning," Minji said simply. "Learning what? How they think, how they fight, how they see the world." She took a sip of water. "And how they see us." Jinook frowned. "Why does that matter?" "They think we're weak." "You're probably right." Minji didn't answer right away. She watched Kolvash stand up from his table, flexing his massive arms. Other students immediately gave him more space, some bowing their heads in respect or fear. "My father told me something before I came here," Minji said finally. "He said the most dangerous enemy is the one you don't see coming. Your father was a soldier, right? A general? He fought in the border wars before Earth joined the Federation." Minji's voice was quiet, but there was something strong underneath. He said smart fighters don't try to be stronger than their enemies. They find ways to make strength useless. Jinook looked confused. "How do you make strength useless?" Before Minji could answer, loud voices came from across the food court. Skovash was standing over a human student named Kim Hyunwoo, the smaller. Human had accidentally bumped into the Vekaran warrior while carrying his lunch tray. A clumsy little creature, Kolvash snarled, his claws extended. "In that Garan space, we step on things that get in our way." "I'm sorry, Hyun," Wu said, his voice shaking. "It was an accident. Accidents have consequences." The food court grew quiet. Even the Vekaran students stopped talking, sensing something was about to happen. Instructors were nearby, but they made no move to intervene. At the academy, students were expected to handle their own conflicts. Kolvash grabbed Hyunwoo by the shirt and lifted him off the ground with one hand. The human student's feet kicked helplessly in the air. "Please," Hyunwoo gasped. "I said I was sorry. Sorry is not enough." Minji watched from her table. She saw how Kolvash held Hyunwoo, left hand gripping the shirt, right hand free for striking. She saw how the Vekaran's weight was distributed slightly forward on his left foot. She saw the angle of his spine, the position of his head, the way his tail balanced his massive body. She saw everything. But she also saw something else. Around the food court, other students watched with different expressions. The Dikaran looked excited, eager to see violence. The Velkari looked scared, grateful it wasn't them. The Modern seemed sad but unsurprised. The Tikful simply observed with their emotionless compound eyes. And the humans? They looked angry but also helpless. They wanted to help Hyunwoo. But they knew they couldn't win a fight against Kolvash. Kolvash raised his right hand, claws gleaming under the lights. "Let this be a lesson about watching where you walk." "That's enough." The voice came from the entrance to the food court. Commander Veltar walked in, his heavy footsteps echoing. Even Kolvash lowered his hand and released Hyunwoo, who fell too. The floor gasping. "Training starts in 10 minutes, Veltar announced. "All combat students report to Arena 7. The crowd began to break up. Kolvash looked down at Hyunwoo one more time, then walked away with his friends. Other students hurried to finish their meals or headed toward the training areas. Jinyuk started to get up. "We should help Hyunwoo," Minji said softly. She was still watching Kolvash as he left. The way he walked, confident and aggressive. The way other students moved out of his path. The way he expected the world to bend around his strength. Most importantly, she watched how he never looked back. To Kolvash, Hyunwoo was already forgotten. Just another weak creature that had learned its place. "Now we can help," Mingi said, standing up. They went to Hyunwoo, who was still sitting on the floor, rubbing his throat. Other human students had gathered around him, offering water and asking if he was okay. "I'm fine," Hyunwoo said, but his voice was rough, just bruised. "This isn't right," muttered another human student. "Someone should report this." "Report it to who?" asked another. "The instructors saw everything. They didn't care." Minji knelt beside Hyunwoo and helped him stand. As she did, she noticed something that made her pause. On the floor where Hyunwoo had been sitting, there were 4 small tears in the metal claw marks from where Kolvash had gripped him. The marks were deep, but they weren't random. They formed a specific pattern. The exact spacing of Kolvash's claws when he made a killing grip. Minji touched the marks with her finger, measuring the distance between them. Then she looked up at the other human students, all talking about unfairness and reporting incidents and finding ways to avoid future conflicts. None of them were looking at the claw marks. None of them were measuring distances or calculating angles. They were thinking like victims, not like students. But Minji wasn't thinking like a victim. She was thinking like her father's daughter, like someone who understood that every piece of information was a weapon, and every enemy mistake was an opportunity. She stood up slowly, brushing dust off her uniform. Round her, the conversation continued about academy politics and unfair treatment. But in her mind, Minji was already planning. The quiet girl in the corner had been watching and learning for months. Soon it would be time to show what she had learned. 3 days after the food court incident, Minji sat in Arena 7 watching the weekly combat rankings. Every student at the academy had to fight to earn their position. The higher your rank, the better your classes, food, and living quarters. The lower your rank, the harder your life became. At the top of the ranking board, one name stayed the same every week: Kolvash. Below him, other Thekaran students filled most of the top 20 positions. A few exceptional students from other species managed to squeeze into the middle ranks, but humans clustered at the bottom. Today we have special matches, announced Commander Veltar from the Arena Center. Rank challenges will determine new positions for next week. Mingi opened her notebook and prepared to watch. She always took notes during combat matches, writing down fighting styles, weaknesses, and patterns. Other students thought she was strange for studying fights so carefully. But Mingi had learned important lessons from her observations. The first match began between two Tikvel students. The insect-like aliens moved fast with their multiple arms, but their fighting was too predictable. They followed the same attack patterns their species had used for thousands of years. Kigi wrote down their timing in weak spots. Next came a match between Velkarai students. The crystal beings fought beautifully, their bodies reflecting light as they moved, but they were too fragile. One hard hit could crack their crystal skin, and they spent too much energy avoiding damage instead of attacking. "Boring," said a Thekaran student, sitting near Minji. When do the real fights start? The real fights meant Thekaran matches. Everything else was just entertainment while they waited for their own species to show true combat skill. After 6 smaller matches, Commander Veltar called out the names everyone was waiting for. Kolvash, rank 1, versus Morgoth, rank 15. Challenger match. The arena erupted in cheers from the Yakaran students. Morgoth was a younger Yakaran who had been climbing the rankings quickly. Many thought he might be the first student in years to seriously challenge Kolvash's position. Both fighters entered the arena wearing simple combat gear. No weapons were allowed in ranking matches, only natural abilities and hand-to-hand combat skills. For Thekaran, this meant claws, teeth, thick scales, and powerful muscles. Kolvash looked confident as always. He was bigger than Morgoth, with darker scales and longer claws. Scars on his arms showed he had survived many battles. Flexed his muscles and roared, showing sharp teeth to the crowd. Morgoth looked nervous but determined. He was faster than Kolvash, with brighter green scales that meant he was younger. His claws were sharper, but his muscles were smaller. "Begin combat," Veltar shouted. The two Thekaran crashed together in the center of the arena. Claws flashed. Tails whipped through the air, and their roars echoed off the walls. They were both skilled fighters, using techniques passed down through generations of Thekaran warriors. But from the first exchange, Mingi could see the outcome. Kolvash was not just stronger, he was smarter. Let Morgoth attack first. Learning his opponent's style, then slowly began to counter every move. When Morgoth tried a high claw strike, Kolvash ducked and hit his ribs. When Morgoth tried to use his tail as a weapon, Kolvash grabbed it and spun him around. Every time the younger fighter thought he found an opening, Kolvash was already prepared for it. Minji wrote quickly in her notebook. She recorded how Kolvash positioned his feet, how he used his opponent's momentum against him, how he saved energy while making Morgoth work harder. Most students only saw the violence, but Minji saw the strategy underneath. The fight lasted 12 minutes. In the end, Kolvash had Morgoth pinned to the ground with claws at his throat. Younger the Thekaran had to tap the ground 3 times to surrender. Winner Kolvash, Veltar announced. Rank 1 maintained. The Thekaran students cheered loudly. Students from other species clapped politely. knowing they were expected to show respect. Kolvash helped Morgoth stand up, and they touched foreheads in the traditional Vekaran gesture of honor after combat. "Good fight," Kolvash said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You will be strong someday." The crowd loved this show of sportsmanship, but Minji noticed something else. When Kolvash thought no one was looking, his expression changed. The friendly mask disappeared, replaced by cold calculation. He had enjoyed hurting Morgoth. The respect he showed was just an act for the audience. Next match, Veltar called. Hyunwoo, rank 73, versus Jackdaw, rank 68. Minji's head snapped up. Kim Hyunwoo, the human student from the food court incident, was being called to fight. His opponent was a medium-sized Thekaran. It's not as big as Kolvash, but still much larger than any human. Hyunwoo entered the arena looking scared. His hands shook as he took his position. Around the arena, students began to whisper. Everyone remembered what had happened in the food court. This felt like punishment disguised as a regular ranking match. Jackdaw entered with a cruel smile. He was younger than Kolvash, but he had the same arrogant confidence that all Vekaran showed when fighting. Lesser species. "This should be quick," someone said behind Minji. "Poor human. Should have stayed home," said another voice. Minji gripped her pen tighter. She wanted to call out, to stop the match, but she knew it would only make things worse for Hyunwoo. The Academy's rules were clear. Once a challenge was made, it had to be completed. "Begin combat." Jackdaw immediately charged forward, not bothering with strategy or caution. Against a human, he felt he only needed to use raw strength. His claws reached for Hyunwoo's chest, aiming to end the fight with one strike. But Hyunwoo surprised everyone. Instead of freezing in fear, he dropped low and rolled to the side. Jackdaw's claws missed. The Thekaran stumbled forward from his own momentum. The human had been taking combat classes seriously. He might not be strong, but he had learned to move quickly and avoid attacks. For a moment it looked like he might actually have a chance. That moment didn't last long. Jackdaw recovered from his surprise and began to fight more carefully. He used his reach advantage, keeping Hyunwoo at a distance, while landing small cuts with his claws. Each cut was shallow, not enough to end the fight, but enough to cause pain and bleeding. Minji realized with growing horror that Jackdaw was playing with his opponent. He could have ended the fight quickly, but he was choosing to make it last longer. He wanted to hurt Hyunwoo slowly, to make an example of what happened to humans who thought they could compete with Thekaran. Around the arena, the crowd's mood began to change. At first they had expected a quick victory. Now they were watching something cruel and deliberate. Some students looked uncomfortable, but no one spoke up. The instructors watched without emotion, as if this was perfectly normal. Hyunwoo kept fighting, but he was getting weaker. Blood ran down his arms from multiple claw cuts. His breathing became heavy, and his movements grew slower. Still he refused to surrender. "Give up, little creature," Jackdaw taunted. "Save yourself more pain." "No," Hyunwoo gasped. "I won't quit." Jackdaw's smile became nastier. "Then I will make you quit." The Thekaran grabbed Hyunwoo by the arm and lifted him into the air. With his free hand, he prepared to strike with his claws, not at the human's chest or head, but at his shoulder joint. It was a move designed to cause permanent damage. Shouted a voice from the stands. Everyone turned to look. Park Jin-yuk had stood up, his face red with anger. "This isn't a fair fight. You're torturing him." Commander Veltar's yellow, eyes fixed on Jin-yuk. "Sit down, human. Combat continues until surrender or victory. These are the rules. The rules are wrong." Jin-yuk shot back. Dangerous silence filled the arena. No student had ever challenged an instructor's authority so directly. Veltar's claws extended slightly, and other Thekaran instructors moved closer. "Perhaps you would like to join your friend in the arena," Veltar asked quietly. Jin-yuk's courage wavered. He looked at Hyunwoo, still held in the air by Jackdaw, then at the angry faces of the Vekaran instructors. Slowly he sat back down. In the arena, Jackdaw laughed. "Even your own kind won't help you. Pathetic." He raised his claws for the strike that would cripple Hyunwoo's arm. The human student closed his eyes, knowing what was coming. The claws came down fast and sharp. They hit exactly where Jaktar aimed, cutting deep into muscle and nerve. Screamed and went limp in the Decarin's grip. "Winner Jaktar," Veltar announced as if nothing unusual had happened. Jaktar dropped Hyunwoo to the arena floor. The human didn't get up. His right arm hung at a wrong angle and blood pooled beneath him. Medical students rushed onto the arena floor to help him. As they carried Hyunwoo away on a stretcher, Minji saw his face. He was conscious but broken, not just physically but mentally. The light in his eyes was gone, replaced by the dull acceptance of defeat. Around the arena, students began to leave. The show was over, and there were classes to attend. The veteran students talked excitedly about Jaktar's victory, already making plans for their own upcoming matches. But Minji stayed in her seat, still writing in her notebook. She had recorded everything, every move Jaktar made, every cruel smile, every moment when he chose to cause extra pain instead of ending the fight quickly. She also wrote down something else. During the fight, when Jaktar had grabbed Hyunwoo's arm, the veteran had exposed his entire left side for almost 3 seconds. He had been so focused on causing pain that he forgot to protect himself. It was a small thing, probably meaningless. Against another veteran, that opening would never last long enough to matter. But Minji wrote it down anyway, along with dozens of other small details that other students had missed. "Why are you still here?" asked a voice behind her. Minji turned to see Commander Veltar standing in the arena entrance. Now, most of the other students had left, and she hadn't noticed the instructor approaching. "I'm studying combat techniques," she said simply. Veltar looked at her notebook, then at her face. "What did you learn today, human?" Minji thought carefully before answering. She could feel the commander testing her, looking for signs of anger or rebellion like Jinyuk had shown. "I learned that strength comes in many forms," she said finally, "and that every fighter has patterns they follow without thinking." Veltar's expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed interested. "What will you do with this knowledge?" "Learn more." The commander stared at her for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. Minji watched him go, then looked back at her notebook. On the page, she had written something that would have surprised the commander if he had seen it. Below all her technical notes about fighting techniques and combat strategies, she had written a single sentence in small, careful letters. Jack Tor. Rank 68. Left side guard drops for 2.8 seconds during overhead grip attacks. Exploitable. Minji closed her notebook and stood up. Round her, the empty arena felt heavy with the memory of what had happened. Hainu's blood was still being cleaned from the floor by maintenance workers. But Minji wasn't thinking about the blood or the cruelty she had witnessed. She was thinking about patterns and weaknesses. About the gap between what fighters thought they were doing and what they were actually doing. Most importantly, she was thinking about the look in Kolvash's eyes when he thought no one was watching. The cold calculation, the enjoyment of others' pain, the absolute certainty that his strength made him untouchable. Every warrior had patterns they followed without thinking. Even the strongest ones. Even the cruelest ones. Minji left the arena with her notebook under her arm, already planning her next study session. The quiet girl in the corner had learned something important today, and she wasn't finished learning yet. 2 weeks after Hyunwoo's injury, another human student disappeared from the academy. Lee Salman had been one of their best pilots, smart and quick, with a bright future ahead of her. Then Kolvash accused her of cheating on a navigation test. Minji sat in the academy's library, reading about the incident in the official report. According to the document, Salman had been caught with unauthorized data during her final exam. The evidence seemed clear. Test answers were found in her personal files. She was expelled immediately. But Minji knew the truth was different. She had been studying in the library when Kolvash and 2 other Decarin students came in 3 days before Salman's test. They had used a computer terminal for 20 minutes, working on something they kept secret. The next day, Salman was accused of cheating. "It's not fair," said Park Jinyuk, sitting across from Minji at their usual table. Salman would never cheat. She was too honest for her own good. Minji closed the report and looked around the library. It was mostly empty, just a few Valkyrie students. reading quietly in the corner and some Tickville working on technical manuals. The Decaran rarely came to the library unless they were planning something. Did you hear about Hyunwoo? Jinyuk asked quietly. What about him? He's leaving the academy. The injury to his arm. Oh. The doctors say it won't heal properly. He can't continue combat training. Minji felt a cold anger building in her chest. First Saman, now Hyunwoo. The Vekaran were systematically removing humans from the academy, and everyone pretended it was normal. How many humans were here when the academy started? She asked. Jinyuk thought for a moment. 35, I think. Why? How many are left? 12. 11 now that Hyunwoo is leaving.
Nice.
Jinyuk's eyes widened as he understood. You think they're doing this on purpose? Mingi didn't answer directly. Instead, she opened her notebook and showed him a page filled with names and dates. Every human student who had left the academy was listed, along with the reasons for their departure and the Necaran students involved in each incident. This is impossible, Jinyuk whispered, reading the list. You're saying they planned all of this? I'm saying they don't want us here and they're making sure we leave. Minji closed the notebook, one by one, until none of us remain. Jinyuk stared at her. What can we do about it? Can't fight them. Can't report them. The instructors are all Vekaran too. We're trapped. Mingi stood up and walked to the library's main terminal. She began searching through the academy's database, looking for something specific. Her fingers moved quickly over the keys as she dug deeper into the system's archives. What are you looking for? Jinyuk asked, following her. The academy's founding documents? The original rules and regulations? Why? Because old rules sometimes contain forgotten options. It took an hour of searching, but Minji finally found what she was looking for. Deep in the academy's legal archives, buried under centuries of updates and revisions, was a section titled Ancient Rights and Privileges. Here, she said, pointing to a specific paragraph. The right of challenge. Jinyuk read over her shoulder. Any student may challenge any other student for their position, regardless of species, rank, or academic standing. The challenge must be witnessed by no fewer than 3 instructors and may not be refused without dishonor. When was this last used? Jinyuk asked. Minji scrolled through the historical records. 57 years ago, a Valkyrie student challenged a Modan for a research position. What happened? The Valkyrie won? The rule is real, and it's still active. Jinyuk looked confused. But what good does that do us? Even if we could challenge someone, we'd just lose. You saw what happened to Hyunwoo. Minji didn't answer immediately. She was thinking about everything she had observed over the past months. The fighting styles, the weaknesses, the patterns that every species followed without realizing it. Most importantly, she was thinking about the one thing that every alien at the academy believed without question. Humans were weak. I want to challenge Kolvash, she said quietly. Jinyuk's face went pale. Minji, no. That's suicide. He's twice your size and trained to kill. He'll destroy you. Maybe, not maybe. Definitely, Jinyuk grabbed her arm. I won't let you do this. I won't watch another friend get hurt. Minji looked at him with calm eyes. What if I told you I think I can win? I'd say you're crazy. What if I told you I've been studying him for months, that I know his fighting style better than he knows it himself? I'd still say you're crazy. Mingi smiled slightly. Then let me show you something. She opened her notebook to a page covered with diagrams and notes. The page showed detailed drawings of Kolvash's fighting stance, his attack patterns, and his defensive positions. Every movement was analyzed and broken down into its basic components. He always leads with his right claw when he attacks, Minji explained, pointing to the diagrams. Always. His left foot moves forward first, then his right claw follows. It takes him 1.2 seconds to complete the motion. So he's predictable. He does the same thing every time because it works against everyone he fights. But what if someone was ready for it? Jinyuk studied the diagrams more closely. Are incredibly detailed. How did you learn all this? I watched, I measured, I timed everything. Minji flipped to another page. Look at this. When he makes his signature killing move, the one where he grabs his opponent's throat, he has to shift his weight completely to his right leg. For 0.8 seconds, his left side is completely unprotected. That's less than 1 second. No one could react that fast. A Decaron couldn't. They're too big and heavy, but a human could, if they knew exactly when and where to strike. Jinook shook. His head, even if you're right about his weaknesses, he's still incredibly strong. One hit from him could kill you, then I won't let him hit me. Minji, please, be realistic. This isn't a game or a theory. This is real combat against the most dangerous fighter in the academy. Minji closed her notebook and looked directly at her friend. Do you know what my mother did before she retired? She was a teacher, right? She taught hand-to-hand combat to Earth Special Forces. Before that, she was Special Forces herself. She fought in places where being smaller and weaker meant you had to be smarter and faster, or you died. Jinook's expression changed. You never told me that. I don't talk about my family much. But my mother taught me things that aren't in any academy textbook. Things about using an opponent's size and strength against them. Even so, and my father wasn't just a general. He was the general who planned the strategy that ended the border wars. He taught me that every enemy has a weakness, and every weakness can be exploited if you're patient enough to find it. Minji stood up and walked to the library's main window. Outside, she could see the academy's training grounds where Decaron students practiced their combat techniques. They moved with confidence and power, secure in their belief that strength always defeated weakness. I've been patient, she said quietly. I've watched and learned and waited. Now it's time to act. Jinook joined her at the window. What about the other humans? If you do this and lose, it will make things worse for her. Everyone, if I do nothing, they'll pick us off one by one anyway. Soman is gone. Yunwoo is gone. How many more before they're satisfied, but why you? Why not wait for someone stronger? Someone with more combat training? Minji looked at him with a sad smile, because I'm the one they'll never see coming. I'm the quiet girl in the corner, who takes notes and doesn't cause trouble. I'm invisible to them. That's exactly why you shouldn't do this. You're not a fighter, Minji, you're a strategist. Sometimes the best strategy is to fight when no one expects it. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the Decaron students practice below. Then Jinook spoke again, his voice worried. How would you even make the challenge? You can't just walk up to Kolvash and ask him to fight. It's the right of challenge. Has specific procedures. I have to make the challenge publicly, in front of witnesses, using the traditional words. Minji had already memorized the requirements. Tomorrow is the weekly ranking ceremony. All students and instructors will be present. That's when I'll do it. Tomorrow? Jinook looked shocked. You're serious about this? I've been serious about this for weeks. I just needed to finish my preparations. What kind of preparations? Minji opened her notebook one more time and showed him the final page. It was covered with timing charts, attack sequences, and defensive counters. At the bottom of the page, written in small, neat letters, was a single sentence. Combat plan Kolvash, vulnerability analysis complete. I know exactly how he fights, she said. I know his strengths, his weaknesses, his habits, and his blind spots. Most importantly, I know that he's never fought anyone who studied him the way I have. Jinook read the page carefully, his expression growing more serious. These calculations, they're incredibly precise. You really think this could work? I think I have a chance. It's a small one, but a real one. And if you're wrong... Minji closed the notebook and looked back out the window. Then at least I'll have tried, and maybe the next human who stands up to them will learn something from my failure. There won't be a next human. If you lose, the rest of us will probably be expelled within a month. Then I'd better not lose. The next morning, Minji sat in her usual corner seat in the academy's main auditorium. Around her, hundreds of students from dozens of species filled the massive room. At the front, on a raised platform, stood the weekly ranking board with its familiar hierarchy of names. Commander Veltar stepped forward to begin the ceremony. Today, we honor our strongest warriors and recognize their achievements in combat. The usual speeches began. praise for the Karen supremacy, warnings about the dangers of weakness, reminders that only the strong survived in the galaxy. Mingi listened with half her attention while reviewing her plans one final time. When the speeches ended, Veltar called for any official challenges or disputes. This was normally just a formality. No one ever spoke up during this part of the ceremony. Today was different. Mingi stood up in her corner seat. Her voice was quiet, but in the large auditorium, everyone could hear her clearly. I invoke the right of challenge. The auditorium fell completely silent. Hundreds of alien faces turned to stare at the small human girl, who had just spoken words that hadn't been heard in over 50 years. Commander Veltar's yellow eyes fixed on her. State your challenge, human. Minji took a deep breath. Everything she had planned, everything she had studied, everything she had learned came down to this moment. I challenge Kolvash, rank 1. For his position, combat to first blood. Traditional rules, no weapons. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then, from somewhere in the crowd, came the sound of Vekaran laughter. It started small, but grew louder as more students joined in. Soon, half the auditorium was laughing at the absurd idea of a tiny human challenging their greatest warrior. But Kolvash wasn't laughing. He stood up from his seat in the front row, his massive frame towering over everyone around him. His yellow eyes studied Minji with something like curiosity. "You're serious," he said, his voice carrying across the silent auditorium. I could kill you with one strike."
You could try.
Kolvash's lips pulled back in a predatory smile. "Very well, little human." Commander Veltar looked between them, clearly surprised by this turn of events. "The challenge is accepted. Combat will take place tomorrow at noon in Arena 1. All students are required to attend." As the ceremony ended and students began to leave, Minji remained in her seat. Around her, she could hear excited conversations in dozens of languages. Everyone was talking about the impossible challenge, the foolish human, and the certain outcome. But in all those conversations, no one mentioned the one thing that mattered most to Minji. For the first time since humans had arrived at the academy, they would finally be seen. Arena 1 had never been so crowded. Students from every species packed the viewing areas, and even instructors who normally skipped student matches had come to watch. Word of the impossible challenge had spread throughout Nexus Prime, and beings from all over the station had arrived to see the spectacle. Minji sat alone in the small preparation room beneath the arena. Above her, she could hear the rumble of thousands of voices talking excitedly about the fight. Most were making bets on how quickly Kolvash would win. The shortest predictions were under 10 seconds. A soft knock came at the door. Entered, carrying a small bag of medical supplies. "How are you feeling?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Ready," Minji said simply. "The betting odds are 500 to 1 against you. Some Vekaran students are betting on whether you'll last 5 seconds or 3. "What did you bet?" Jinyuk smiled sadly. "I bet on you to win. Got great odds." Mingi looked at her friend. "You don't think I can do it?" "I think you're the smartest person I've ever met. I think you've planned this better than anyone could plan. Anything but... He paused. "I also think some things can't be overcome with planning alone. My mother told me something once," Minji said, checking her simple training clothes one last time. "She said the most dangerous moment in any fight is when your opponent thinks they've already won. And when is that? The moment before they lose." Another knock came at the door. Commander Veltar entered, his massive frame filling the doorway. "It is time, human," he said. "Are you prepared to withdraw your challenge? There is no shame in recognizing your limitations." Minji stood up. "I'm ready to fight." Veltar studied her for a long moment. "You are either very brave or very foolish. Maybe both. If you survive this, you will have earned something few beings ever achieve: the respect of your enemies." The commander's yellow eyes seemed almost sad. "I hope you survive this." Minji followed Veltar through the corridors leading to Arena 1. As they walked, she could hear the crowd growing louder. When they reached the arena entrance, the sound became overwhelming. The massive circular arena was packed beyond capacity. Every seat was filled, and beings stood in the aisles and corridors. In the center of it all was the fighting circle. 50 feet of empty space marked by ancient symbols. As Mingy entered, a strange thing happened. The crowd, which had been roaring with excitement, gradually fell silent. Thousands of eyes watched the small human girl walk calmly toward the center of the arena. She looked impossibly tiny in the vast space. On the opposite side, Kolvash made his entrance. The crowd erupted in cheers as the massive Decaran warrior strode into the arena. He was nearly 8 feet tall, with muscles that rippled under his dark green scales. His claws gleamed under the arena lights, and his yellow eyes fixed on Mingy. With predatory focus, he raised his arms to acknowledge the crowd, flexing his massive muscles and showing his sharp teeth. The Decaran students chanted his name while students from other species clapped politely. Everyone knew they were about to witness the shortest fight in Academy history. Mingy walked to her position in the fighting circle and stood quietly. She didn't wave to the crowd or make any dramatic gestures. She simply waited, her dark eyes focused on her opponent. Commander Veltar stepped between them. This is a formal challenge fight. Combat continues until first blood or surrender. Weapons are permitted. Do both fighters understand the rules? I understand, Kolvash said, his voice carrying easily through the arena. I understand, Mingy said, her voice much quieter, but still audible. Take your positions. The two fighters moved to opposite sides of the circle. The size difference was shocking. Kolvash looked like he could break Mingy in half with his bare hands. His reach was twice as long as hers. His weight was probably 4 times greater. His natural weapons were far superior. In the stands, some alien students actually looked away. They didn't want to see what was about to happen. Begin combat, Veltar shouted. For a moment, neither fighter moved. Kolvash stood in his traditional combat stance, claws extended, waiting for his opponent to make the first move. In every fight he had ever won, his enemies came to him. Driven by desperation or foolish bravery, Mingy stood perfectly still, her hands at her sides, studying her opponent. She was memorizing his exact position, the angle of his claws, the distribution of his weight. Everything had to be perfect. The crowd began to grow restless. Some Decaran students shouted for Kolvash to attack, but the warrior was patient. He had fought enough battles to know that rushing led to mistakes. Finally, Mingy took a single step forward. Kolvash smiled. The little human had made her choice. Now he would end this quickly and show everyone what happened to those who challenged. The Decaran supremacy. He charged forward with devastating speed, his right claw leading exactly as Mingy had predicted. His left foot moved first, then his massive frame followed, building momentum for a strike that would have torn through steel. But when his claw reached the space where Mingy had been standing, she was no longer there. She had moved at the last possible moment, stepping to his left side just as his weight shifted to his right leg. For exactly 0.8 seconds. His entire left side was unprotected while he completed his attack motion. Mingy's strike was not powerful. She didn't have the strength to match a Decaran warrior. But she didn't need strength. She needed precision. Her fist hit a specific point just below Kolvash's left shoulder, striking a nerve cluster that her mother had taught her about years ago. It was a weakness that existed in many species, including Decaran, but few beings knew about it. The effect was immediate. Kolvash's left arm went completely numb, and his balance shifted unexpectedly. The massive warrior who had been charging forward with unstoppable force suddenly found himself stumbling sideways, but Mingy wasn't finished. As Kolvash struggled to recover his balance, she moved to his back. Her second strike hit another nerve point at the base of his neck, not hard enough to cause serious damage, but precise enough to disrupt his coordination. Kolvash spun around, roaring in anger and confusion. His right claw swept through the air where Mingy should have been, but once again, she had already moved. The crowd was silent now, shocked by what they were seeing. This wasn't supposed to happen. The little human was supposed to be on the ground, defeated in seconds. Instead, she was making Kolvash look clumsy and slow. "Stand still and fight," Kolvash bellowed, his voice echoing through the arena. But Mingy had no intention of standing still. She had studied his attack patterns for months, and she knew exactly how he would react to frustration. Angry fighters made bigger mistakes, and bigger mistakes created bigger opportunities. Kolvash charged again, this time with both claws extended. He was trying to use his size advantage to trap Minji against the edge of the fighting circle. It was a smart strategy against most opponents. Against Minji, it was exactly what she had been waiting for. As the massive Thekaron closed in, Minji did something unexpected. Instead of dodging to either side, she dropped low and rolled forward, passing directly under Kolvash's guard. The move was so unusual that the warrior's reflexes didn't know how to respond. By the time Kolvash realized what had happened, Minji was behind him again. This time, her target was his right leg specifically, a pressure point that would cause his entire leg to cramp. Her strike was perfect. Kolvash's right leg seized up, and the massive warrior crashed to one knee with a roar of pain and surprise. The arena was completely silent now. No one could believe what they were seeing. Kolvash, the Academy's greatest fighter, was on his knees while a tiny human girl stood calmly behind him. But the fight wasn't over yet. Kolvash was hurt and frustrated, but he was still incredibly dangerous. He spun around from his kneeling position, his claws reaching for Minji's legs. This time, his claw connected. The sharp edge cut across Minji's left thigh, tearing through her training clothes and drawing a line of bright red blood. The crowd gasped as they saw the crimson stain spreading across the fabric. First blood. By the rules of the challenge, the fight was over. Commander Veltar stepped forward, his voice booming across the silent arena. First blood to Kolvash. The challenge is... Wait, Minji said quietly. She looked down at the cut on her leg, then at the small amount of blood on Kolvash's claw. Then she smiled, checked his shoulder, she said. Every eye in the arena turned to look at Kolvash. The massive warrior was still kneeling, breathing heavily from exertion and pain. On his left shoulder, where Minji's first strike had landed, was a small trickle of blood from where her knuckles had scraped against his scales. The silence stretched for what felt like forever. Then Commander Veltar spoke, his voice filled with disbelief. First blood to... the human. Minji is declared the winner, the arena erupted. Not in cheers, but in shocked exclamations and confused babble, as thousands of beings tried to understand what they had just witnessed. The impossible had happened. The tiny human girl had defeated the Academy's greatest warrior. Kolvash stared at Minji in complete shock. His left arm was still numb, his right leg was cramping, and his coordination was still disrupted from the nerve strikes. But more than the physical effects, his mind couldn't process what had happened. He had been beaten, not by strength or superior weapons, but by knowledge and precision. The little human had studied him like a puzzle and found the exact way to take him apart. How? He whispered, his voice barely audible over the chaos and the stands. Minji knelt beside the fallen warrior, her expression serious, but not cruel. You fight the same way every time, she said simply. You're incredibly skilled, but you never learn to adapt when your assumptions are wrong. She stood up and offered him her hand. After a moment's hesitation, Kolvash took it and allowed her to help him stand. You are not weak, he said, his voice filled with a new kind of respect. No, Minji agreed. I'm just different. As they walked toward the medical area together, the crowd slowly began to disperse. Students from every species were talking excitedly about what they had seen, and already the story was being told and retold with growing amazement. The quiet girl in the corner had stepped out of the shadows. Nothing at the Academy would ever be the same. The Academy's medical center had never been so quiet. Minji sat on an examination table while a Velkari healer worked on the cut across her thigh. The crystal being's touch was gentle, and the wound was already closing under the advanced medical treatment. But the real healing happening in the room wasn't physical. Across from her, Kolvash sat on another table while doctors worked on his shoulder and leg. The nerve damage was temporary, but his pride would take much longer to recover. He kept looking at Minji with an expression she had never seen on a Vekaran face before. Genuine respect. I have fought hundreds of opponents, he said quietly. His voice different from the arrogant roar everyone was used to hearing. Warriors from every corner of the galaxy. But I never fought anyone who understood me better than I understood myself. Minji finished putting on a clean uniform and looked at him seriously. You're an excellent fighter. It's maybe the best I've ever seen. But excellent fighters can become predictable if they never face anyone who studies them. Your people, humans. Do they all think like you? Some do. We're good at watching and learning. It's how we survived on our world when everything else was bigger and stronger than us. Kolvash was quiet for a long moment. I owe you an apology. Not just for today, but for everything. The way I treated your friends, the things I said about your species. You believed what you were taught, Minji said simply. We all do, until we learn better. The medical center door opened, and Commander Veltar entered. The massive Decoran instructor looked at both students, then focused on Minji. The Academy Council wants to see you, he said. They have questions about what happened today. Am I in trouble? No, but you have created complications. An hour later, Minji sat in the Academy's main conference room, around a large table. Sat the most important beings on Nexus Prime, commanders, instructors, and Academy officials from multiple species. At the head of the table was High Commander Zethkal, the oldest and most respected Decoran on the station. Han Mingi, the High Commander said, his ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries. You have done something today that many thought impossible. You have defeated our finest warrior in single combat. Yes, sir. More importantly, you have challenged assumptions that have guided this academy for over 200 years. Zethkal's yellow eyes studied her carefully. Tell me, what did you hope to accomplish with your challenge? Minji thought before answering. I wanted to show that strength comes in many forms. And that judging someone based on their species instead of their abilities is a mistake. And do you believe you succeeded? I think I made people think. Whether they change their minds is up to them. Commander Veltar leaned forward. Your victory has created a problem. By our own rules, you are now ranked first in combat standings. But our entire system assumes that the strongest fighter will be that Quran. Are you going to change the rules? Minji asked. We cannot. The right of challenge is sacred, and your victory was witnessed by thousands. But we must decide what this means for the Academy's future. High Commander Zethkal stood up slowly, his massive frame casting shadows across the room. For 2 centuries, this Academy has operated under the belief that physical power determines worth. That some species are naturally superior to others. Today, a small human girl has proven that belief wrong. He walked to the room's main window, looking out at the training grounds where students from dozens of species continued their daily exercises. I've lived for over 300 years, he continued. I've seen empires rise and fall, species discover the stars, and civilizations learn to work together. But I have never seen anything quite like what happened in Arena 1 today. Do you mean, Minji asked? You didn't just defeat Kolvash, you defeated an idea? The idea that strength is everything, that some beings are inherently better than others. He turned back to face her. That idea has been the foundation of the Echeron culture for thousands of years. The room fell silent. Around the table, Decoran. Commanders shifted uncomfortably. Some looked angry, others thoughtful, and a few seemed almost relieved. What happens now? Minji asked. Now we learn, said Zethkal. The Academy will change because it must. We will stop judging students by their species and start judging them by their abilities. We will teach that intelligence and strategy are as valuable as physical strength. Commander Veltar spoke up. And what about the human students? Well, they'd be treated equally. They'll be treated as they should have been from the beginning, as individuals with their own unique strengths and weaknesses. As the meeting ended, Mingi walked back through the Academy's corridors. But something was different now. Students who had ignored her before now watched her with curious eyes. Some looked respectful, others fearful, and many seemed to be seeing her clearly for the first time. In the main dining hall, she found Park Jinyuk sitting with several other human students. When he saw her approach, his face broke into a huge smile. The famous warrior returns, said loudly enough for nearby. Tables to hear. I'm not a warrior, Minji said, sitting down with her lunch tray. I'm still just a student. Student who beat the Academy's top fighter, said Kim Dong-yoon, another human student. Do you know what this means for all of us? Before Minji could answer, an unexpected voice spoke behind her. It means you are not the weak creatures we thought you were. Everyone turned to see Kolvash standing behind Minji's chair. The massive Thekaren looked different somehow. Less arrogant, more thoughtful. Several human students tensed, unsure what to expect. May I sit with you? He asked. The request shocked everyone at the table. Kolvash had never sat with non-Thekaren students before. After a moment, Jinyuk moved over to make room. As the former champion sat down, conversations at nearby tables stopped. Everyone in the dining hall watched to see what would happen. I wanted to apologize, Kolvash said, addressing all the human students. To all of you. I was wrong about your people, and I'm sorry for the pain I caused. What changed your mind? Asked Dong-yoon. Your friend showed me something I never understood before. She showed me that being different doesn't mean being weak, just means being ... different. Over the following days, word of Minji's victory spread far beyond the Academy. News reports reached every corner of the galaxy, telling the story of the quiet human girl who had defeated the mighty Thekaran warrior. Some species celebrated, others were skeptical, but everyone was talking about it. More importantly, things began to change at the Academy itself. Instructors started paying attention to students they had previously ignored. The ranking system was reformed to include intelligence tests and strategic thinking alongside physical combat. Students from different species began working together on projects instead of staying separated by artificial barriers. Not everyone was happy with the changes. Some Thekaran students complained that the Academy was becoming soft by valuing brains over brawn. But their complaints grew quieter when they saw their own grades improving under the new system that recognized multiple types of talent. 3 weeks after the fight, Gi received a priority message on her personal communicator. The sender was Earth Fleet Command, and the message was marked classified Admiral Eyes Only. She read it twice before the full meaning sank in. The message was from Admiral Chen Sujin, the highest-ranking human in Earth's military. It was short and direct. Cadet Han Minji, your demonstration at the Galactic Academy has attracted attention at the highest levels of Fleet Command. Your ability to analyze opponents and exploit weaknesses through strategic thinking rather than brute force aligns perfectly with humanity's military doctrine. Upon completion of your Academy training, you are requested to report to Earth Fleet. Strategic Command for Advanced Training in Xenobiology, Combat Analysis. Your new assignment. Teaching other species that humans are not to be underestimated. Congratulations on representing humanity with honor. Admiral Chen Mingi stared at the message for a long time. Then she looked around her small dormitory room, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. It was the months of careful observation, the detailed notes, the patient planning. All of it had been building toward something larger than just one fight. A soft knock came at her door. She opened it to find Jinyuk standing in the hallway with a concerned expression. You got a message from Earth, didn't you? He asked. How did you know? Because I got one too. So do most of the other humans. They want us for special assignments. When we graduate, Mingay invited him in and showed him her message. His eyes widened as he read it. Strategic Command? They want you to teach other species about fighting humans? Apparently so. But why? We're not warriors. We're not conquerors. Minji walked to her window and looked out at the training grounds where alien students continued their daily exercises. But now she could see human students training alongside them, no longer relegated to the background. We're not warriors in the traditional sense, she said finally. But we are something else. We're adapters. We're observers. That survives by being underestimated. And now they want to use that? They want to make sure it's never used against us. Minji turned back to her friend. Think about it. For thousands of years, other species have seen humans as weak because we don't have claws or thick skin or natural weapons. But our real weapon was never physical. What is it then? The ability to watch, learn, and adapt. The ability to find weaknesses where others see only strength. The ability to win fights before they even begin. Jinyuk was quiet for a moment. So what happens now? Now we finish our education. We learn everything we can about every species in the galaxy. And when we graduate, we make sure that no one ever again mistakes human intelligence for human weakness. That evening, Minji sat in her usual corner of the combat theory classroom. But now, instead of being ignored, she found herself surrounded by students from multiple species asking questions about strategy and tactics. Even some veteran students had joined the group, eager to learn new approaches to combat. As she answered their questions and shared her observations, Minji realized something important. The quiet girl in the corner was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who had proven that being different wasn't a weakness to be hidden, but a strength to be celebrated. The galaxy had learned something important that day in Arena 1. Humans weren't just another species to be categorized and dismissed. They were something unique, something dangerous in their own way. They were the ones who watched from the shadows, learned from their observations, and struck when the moment was perfect. They were the species that turned weakness into strength and made the impossible possible. And now, thanks to one quiet girl's careful planning and perfect timing, everyone knew it. The age of underestimating humanity was over.